Howdy. There he goes. Hey, Larry.
Howdy.
That truck sure is a good truck.
It sure is. Oh, that one.
Gets me where I need to go and haul the load.
21 years old.
And today I was, Mick was with me, we were taking a load to the dump. And on the way back, the whole dash was correct. Now the light was on, nothing was shaky.
You fixed it or it just?
No, it just worked. For that may be the second time I've ever seen it, just all of it working at the same time.
Huh. Wow.
Maybe it's loose wire.
Is it still working?
I haven't checked.
No, it's not loose wire, I don't think.
No.
It has a ghost.
Yeah, I think it's a go. It could be a go from there.
Well, that's good. Well, it didn't
Larry
always-
Grandpa.
It didn't always work for me, I have to say.
Well, even when it does it, I don't trust it. So I always reset the gas, the odometer for the gas, and
Well,
whenever I get close to 300, I don't know how much I got left. I just go fill it up.
Probably not much.
Right?
At 300 without.
Well, if I'm towing something, not much, but I think you could probably do 325. I usually go like, I'm at like 285. I'll take it on in.
I'm just gonna test it. 25 by 42.
That's pretty close. to a
Oh,
gas.
I don't want to test it. I'm scared if I let it run out of gas, that there might be some sort of sediment, rust in there, that gets in the engine.
It's never run out, it's never been out of gas.
I don't want it to.
Well, so it's 21, it's old enough to vote.
friend, it's his buddies.
They have cows in Nebraska that are supposed to be good, that's a little bit closer to Michigan.
Well, it's not a,
Like Omaha steaks?
it's only,
Shit, that'd be like 5 times as expensive.
$800 for shipping, but when you're splitting it among 6-7 people, it doesn't cost that much. Like I said, he knows the guy, there's no chemicals, no shots to the cow. What we're looking for. And we got a pig this time too, that'll be really, 200 pounds.
Where's that?
So when we coming over for beef and pork?
Anyway, when I get it,
Tenderloin.
you like pork ribs?
Yeah.
Who likes ribs?
We had so many times, where we went overboard for food.
Actually, we took a big pack home.
Oh, yeah, I actually, we got 3, we thought it was just, each packet was just 1 rack. Each packet was 2 racks of ribs, so we ended up with 6.
We ended up,
Oh,
It's got like
water.
turkeys we had it.
they didn't know get eat. We had some white here because we had to clean out the refrigerator the other day. It'd been in there for over 2 weeks.
There was-
Thank you for doing that.
And the
Got
chocolate,
the cake.
and the chocolate cake.
It's
I
been
got-
in there 2 weeks.
I got tired of cleaning up chocolate cake. It was full.
Well, that's,
It's been in there
Oh,
2
the
weeks.
kids.
Yeah.
oh, you mean there, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I thought you meant at your house. I know that's your problem.
No, I didn't take any chocolate cake home.
No, and we didn't throw any ribs out at our house either.
No, we ate all of those. Actually, we should have taken more home.
Well, I didn't communicate well with Jim on the ribs. I like to get the short, small ribs.
I showed him pictures.
Well, it's hard to tell on a picture. I couldn't tell.
Oh, so they were bigger than.
Yeah, they're huge. I mean, I'm used to buying those small ones. And
There weren't that many left in there when we closed them. I mean,
that explains why they were so much cheaper. They're a little chewier. The ones I get are more, they're like $12 to $15 a rack. Those are like, yeah. They just fall off quite a bit.
Oh, Arizona grassraisedbeef.com.
He said he didn't like theirs.
I appreciate you looking it up, but I'm gonna stick with Chad. That first cow was
I knew they were
amazingly good. Best thing I've ever had.
So
We'll
good.
get somebody down here.
Well, that's,
I assume it's for,
yeah, it's frozen. It's still at Evil's frozen, so it's not, we got a guy that might bring it, we'll know next week on Thursday. Howdy.
How y'all doing?
Good. Well, when do you guys think of?
Tomorrow morning.
Good timing.
Well, like 1 o'clock, so.
Next week.
40 is 150
Yeah.
next week.
Exactly, I saw that. It's gonna be
I can see that.
Yep, starts, when, Sunday, Monday,
Monday,
well, Monday's, something like 111.
and it's gonna be,
Well, I had
116 by the end of the week.
Wow.
Nobody's gonna wanna go outside.
Is that rare for this time of year?
Not really.
This time, actually,
Usually
June-
June is the hottest month.
they were saying tonight that this time last year, we had already had 4 days over a month. Haven't had any so far this year.
That makes sense.
But it's the longest, the longest day, and that's it gets more vacation. I'm not saying it's that much cooler in July, August, and September, it's just almost on point. And then we'll have periods where the low is 90.
Oh, the month of May is perfect. Came last May, I'm coming every day now. We both know.
It's kinda miserable about August.
Yeah, we usually came in August. We would come this year in August as well, but we're just moving into the house. Well, this, August is not that nice in Florida.
I wouldn't think so.
It's swamp.
I like it.
Oh,
I so miss the
my sister-in-law had her wedding in Florida in August outside. We tried so hard to get her to change it. Jesse.
It's Florida.
Yeah.
It will rain.
Yeah.
And so,
But it's one of those sometimes.
we're all out there, we're in our nice suits. It was miserable.
Oh, yeah, it's tough.
Oh, man. I remember when I was taking my jacket off, it's like, it literally was peeling it off.
So did she ever say you were like,
No. No, but she didn't need to say it. She didn't need to say it.
She knew.
Everyone knew.
Was it a sunset wedding? Was it East West Coast sunset wedding?
I don't remember. I just remember thinking, finish up. built the wall, and the whole wall was joined together to half its height, for the people had a mind to work. I would look at the context first.
You didn't put the context.
But your Bible has it.
Let these work.
Okay, good evening. We have our guest speaker here this evening, Garrett Bigham. Been enjoying the lessons I've been hearing from the young men, and they are just fantastic. And I've heard Garrett speak before. I know he does a wonderful job, so I'm looking forward to that. Henriette is home. She was here yesterday at the seniors meeting. That went well, and she did not have a heart attack. They don't know what, but she is doing much, much better. We're thankful for that. How many showed up to the seniors meeting? 16. So that went very well. Alex is flying today, so let's keep Alex in our prayers. He drove straight down from camp, got on a flight, and head out. So he's got a lot going on. So let's keep him in our prayers. Of course, continue to remember Laszlo and his recovering and recuperating. He's got that. He's in that rehab for the fractured back. Nick is doing better. He's off the walker. He's got the cane next. I thought maybe he had the cane for Jim. That's him upside the head. And of course, all those who will be traveling over this summer. Summer camp's going well. They're up there. We're doing high school camp right now. Next week is junior high, and a lot going on right now. We had 31 sign up for high school camp, and 46 showed up. So that's good. That's what we want to see and hear. Is there anything else that needs to be announced? Any other prayers? Okay, let me get the song service up and running. And for those who are at home, turn to number 30, Father and Friend Thy Light. Number 30, Father and Friend Thy Light. Father and friend, thy light, thy love, beaming through all thy works we see. Thy glory gilds the heavens above, and all the earth is full of thee. Thy voice we hear, thy presence feel, while thou too pure for mortal sight, enwrapped in clouds invisible, reignest the Lord of life and light. Thy children shall not faint nor fear, sustained by this delightful thought, since thou their God art everywhere, they cannot be where thou art not. Number 53, Hear Me When I Call. Number 53, Hear Me When I Call. Hear me when I call, O God, my righteousness. Unto thee I come in weakness and distress. Hold my trembling hand, lest helpless I should fall. Oh, hear me, Lord, hear me. Oh, hear me when I call. Hear my cry, O God, attend.
Clouds of doubt arise, and faith grows weak and small. Oh, hear me, Lord, hear me. Oh, hear me when I call. Hear my voice, O God, and cleanse my soul within. Mercy do I need for all my doubts and sin. Only in thy grace I trust, my all in all. Oh, hear me, Lord, hear me. Oh, hear me when I call. Hear my prayer, O God. I need thy cleansing power. Let me feel thee near each moment of each hour. Hold my trembling hand, lest helpless I should fall. Oh, hear me, Lord, hear me. Oh, hear me when I call. Number 295, He leadeth me. 295, He leadeth me. After this song, we'll have Pew Packers with our 2, 3, 4 Packers. He leadeth me, O blessed thought, O words with heavenly comfort fraught. Whate'er I do, where'er I be, still 'tis God's hand that leadeth me. He leadeth me, He leadeth me, by His own hand He leadeth me. His faithful follower I would be, for by His hand He leadeth me. Sometimes mid scenes of deepest gloom, sometimes where Eden's flowers bloom, my waters still o'er troubled sea, still 'tis His hand that leadeth me. He leadeth me, He leadeth me, by His own hand He leadeth me. His faithful follower I would be, for by His hand He leadeth me. And when my task on earth is done, when by thy grace the victory is won, in death's cold way I will not flee, since God through Jordan leadeth me. He leadeth me, He leadeth me, by His own hand He leadeth me. His faithful follower I would be, for by His hand He leadeth me. All right, Pew Packers, come on up. At least my two. Others may come if they so wish to. All right, we're going to be doing 2 Samuel chapter 9. Who read 2 Samuel 9? Yes, you did. You read it too? Okay. All right. Raise your hand if you think you know the answer. David asked if there was anyone left of this man's house. The house of Saul is correct. Good job. David wanted to show the descendants kindness for the sake of this man. Jonah. Is it
Second.
Samuel? Not Samuel. Josh?
Jonathan.
Jonathan. That is right. Remember Jonathan. All right. David inquired of this man who was a servant to Saul. Ziba, Abner, Nabal, Philemon. Go. Or bring it. Abner? No, not Abner. Ziba. Ziba. Now the servant said, one of this man's sons was still alive. Jonathan, Saul, Abner, or Jacob. Jonah.
Third.
Third one, Abner. No, not Abner. Joshua.
Jonathan.
Is Jonathan again? That's right. Very good. What physical impairment did Mephibosheth have? No. Josh.
He was the first one.
The first one, he was crippled. Do you remember where he was crippled? What was it? His feet. That's right. Do you know how that happened? Anyone know how Mephibosheth's feet were crippled?
It was dropped.
That's right. When they thought David's men were coming to kill all the family, the nurse who had him was running, and she dropped him as an infant on his feet, crippled him. Yes, he was crippled. All right. David told Mephibosheth he would restore this to him: Saul's land, the crown, his health, or his wife. Not his health. Cool.
Saul's land.
Saul's land. That is correct. Gave him Saul's land. So David said Mephibosheth should continually do this: eat at David's table, ride David's horse, rule Israel with David, or go to battle with David. Jonah.
Eat at David's table.
Very good. That is it. Eat at David's table. Good job, son. Mephibosheth referred to himself as this when he's talking to David: a pauper, a dead dog, a lucky man, a humble servant. Josh.
Dead dog.
Dead dog. Why would he refer to himself as that before David? Anyone?
He's being humble.
He's being humble. That's a way of recognizing himself before who David was, being the king and chosen one of God. Now, who am I? I am no better than a dead dog. And so he's humbled himself before David the king. David told Ziba and his sons and his servants to do this for Mephibosheth: guard his house, nurse him back to health, cultivate his ground, or build him a house. Josh,
Number 3.
can you say it? What?
The third one.
Cultivate the ground. That's right. Good job. Cultivate the ground. What was the name of Mephibosheth's son? Jonathan, Micah, Ahab, Meshobab. Cool. Yes, Micah is the name. That's an interesting story. Why was David almost seems desperate to find a son of Jonathan, a relative of Jonathan, that he could bless? Why? It wasn't in the chapter you read.
Because he loved Jonathan and he wanted to bless him.
That's right. How did you remember how David reacted when he heard that Saul and Jonathan had been killed in battle? Saul had been trying to kill David for how long? Long time. This ends the war with those two being dead. And yet he wanted to find someone to bless and to sit at his table, to eat with him. What does a king normally do with the family of the other king after he's gained the throne? Kill them all. That's why they were running out of the palace, and poor Mephibosheth as a baby got dropped like that because they thought they were going to be killed. David was a man after what?
God's own heart.
That's right, after God's own heart. Next week we're going to do 2 Samuel chapter 10. How do we end Pew Packer?
Fear, believe, confess, be baptized in the faithful Christian life.
Very good. Getting better. Good job. A little bit more. Cole, would you say a prayer for us?
Our Father in heaven, we're so thankful for another Wednesday that we can just come together as a church and worship you. We pray that Garrett's lesson that he'll bring us here tonight will be applicable to you, that we can take it in as Christians. Lord, we also pray for those on the prayer list. Be with them and keep your healing hand upon them, that they may have a safe recovery. We pray for all these things in your Lord's name. Amen.
Amen. Good prayer. Thank you. All right. Let me see. Oh, go sit. Go sit. We're going to have our guest speaker come up now, and Garrett will be bringing us the lesson and closing. I did a thing at the beginning,
Okay.
and we had a prayer.
Which, those two things happen anyway. So.
I know, but I thought it was a very good prayer. Mr. Garrett.
Well, good evening, everyone. I was originally going to speak last Wednesday, but my allergies got the best of me, and I lost my voice for 3 or 4 days, which happened to coincide with last week's Wednesday night. So I was unable, and so I had to push it back to next week, to today. And I think part of the reason I lost my voice is because we went up to camp for the Memorial Day weekend and we were kicking up all the dust, and I think that's what did me in. But I was on the drive up there to Copper Basin. I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about here tonight, and I had a couple ideas, and drawing on lessons from Nehemiah was one that kept on bouncing around in my head. And while we were up there, I was still undecided, and we were moving some items around, and Tyler just kind of offhand jokingly said, we're like Nehemiah repairing the walls of Jerusalem, getting the camp ready for all the camp sessions. So I took that as a sign that I would go ahead and talk about Nehemiah and lessons that we can learn from Nehemiah. And the book of Nehemiah is definitely one of my favorite books of the Bible. If you want a good example of what godly leadership in action looks like, I think Nehemiah is one of the best books for that. And so I thought that there's so many lessons that we can learn from Nehemiah, but I thought we would just look at just 3 here tonight, just very briefly. And the first one being that Nehemiah is a man of vision. Nehemiah, he's a man with a plan. I feel like if you want to accomplish something, you have to have vision, you have to have a goal in mind. And we see that in chapter 2, verses 5 through 8. Starting in verse 5, "And I, Nehemiah, said to the king, Artaxerxes, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, I ask that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's tombs, that I may rebuild it." So at this point, in chapter 1, we learn that Hananiah and a couple other men from Judah come and they relay the state of disrepair that the walls of Jerusalem are in. And we learn in chapter 1, verse 4, that when Nehemiah heard these words, that he sat down and wept and mourned for many days, and he was fasting and praying before the God of heaven. And in the time between chapter 1, what we just read, and in chapter 2, when he goes to Artaxerxes as the cupbearer, 3 months elapsed between those two instances, and I think we tend to forget that a lot of time. Nehemiah had a lot of time to think about this. He had a lot of time to develop a plan, to develop a vision, and that's what I think in large part is what he can attribute to his success to, is that he had vision and he knew what he needed to do. And it reminds me of Proverbs chapter 28, or chapter 29, verse 18 rather, where they write, "Where there is no vision, the people cast off all restraint." And in the Hebrew, there's kind of a word picture there. And the word for the people throwing their restraints off, it's a similar language to a horse, a working horse, throwing its restraints off and running into the wild aimlessly. And so with the idea there being that the end result of a working horse throwing its restraints off and running off into the wild is that that horse is probably going to perish. You know, there's a saying, if you aim for nothing, you're probably going to hit it. And I think that's something that applies for us as well. That's what he's telling us here in Proverbs 29. Where there's no vision, the people cast off their restraints. Where there's no vision, the people perish. And I think that can happen with a family, that can happen with a city, that can happen with a congregation. If you don't have a vision, if you don't have a goal, and you don't have an idea of how you're going to get to that goal, it's not going to be good. And that family, that city, or that congregation is going to perish. So that's the first point that I wanted to make, is that Nehemiah is a man of great vision, and that in part leads to his success. Second point is that whenever you take up an endeavor, especially in God's name, you're going to have some Sanballats, some Tobiahs, and some Geshems along the way. Now, who are these men? Well, we first see them in chapter 2, verse 19. And as for Sanballat and Tobiah, we can tell from their names, Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite. We know that they're officials from the neighboring hostile nations of the Samaritans and the Ammonites. And as for Geshem, he's titled as Geshem the Arab, so we know that he's a chief of one of the Arab races that's living presumably in South Palestine, close to Jerusalem. But what do these men do? Well, these men, they harass, they mock, they lie, and eventually they even seek to do physical harm to Nehemiah and the people who are living in Jerusalem and rebuilding the walls. And we see the first instance of this in chapter 2 of Nehemiah, verse 19. "But when Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite official, and Geshem the Arab heard of it, they laughed at us," that is, the prospect of them building the wall, "and despised us and said, 'What is this thing that you are doing? Will you rebel against the king?' So I answered and said to them, 'The God of heaven himself will prosper us. Therefore we his servants will arise and build, but you have no heritage or right or memorial in Jerusalem.'" So this is just the first instance, and it only escalates from there. These men, they see Nehemiah come back, and they see him start to begin the repairs on the wall, and they say, well, hold on, what's going on here? And then and as you go on in chapter 4, verse 7, we read that, "Now it happened when Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, the Ammonites, heard that the walls of Jerusalem were being restored and the gaps were beginning to be closed, that they became very angry, and all of them conspired together to come and attack Jerusalem and to create confusion." So now it's kind of escalated from, oh, we're just going to mock and we're just going to make fun of you. You know, earlier on they mentioned that, you know, one of them said that, oh, well, don't worry about it, because as soon as they build up the wall, even if a fox runs on top of it, the wall is going to crumble. But now it's escalated. Now they've brought their armies against Nehemiah and the men who are rebuilding the walls. And this attempt to discourage Nehemiah and the men who are building the walls is unsuccessful. But we see that these three aren't done. We see that in chapter 6, verses 1 and 2. Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem, these three bad actors again show up, And the rest of our enemies heard that I had rebuilt the wall, and that there were no breaks left in it, though at that time I had not hung the doors on the gate. Then Sanballat and Geshem sent to me a letter, saying, Come, let us meet together among the villages in the plain of Ono. And so just as an aside, I think it's important we need to note that if enemies that are seeking to do you harm invite you to a place called Ono, it's probably not a good idea to go and meet them there. And that's what Nehemiah came to the same conclusion. He finishes that verse and says, But they thought to do me harm. So he just sends a messenger to them and says, I can't see you. I'm doing great work. Why should the work cease while I leave it and go down to you? And so they send letters again, 4 more letters, and Nehemiah sends the same response. He's saying, look, you guys are doing whatever you're going to do. I'm doing good work here. I'm not going to let you guys stop whatever work I'm doing so I can go down and so you guys can probably kill me, because that's probably what they were going to try and do. And so these 3, Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, realize this. And so then in verse 5 and 8, it says that they wrote a letter, an open letter to Nehemiah, and they gave it to him, and it said, It is reported among the nations, and Geshem says that you and the Jews plan to rebel. Therefore, according to these rumors, you are rebuilding the wall, that you may be their king. And you have also appointed prophets to proclaim concerning you at Jerusalem, saying, There is a king in Judah. Now these matters will be reported to the king Artaxerxes. So come, therefore, and let us consult together. But then Nehemiah responds, and he says, No such things as you say are being done, but you invent them in your own heart. So again, Nehemiah just kind of brushes them off and says, I'm not going to, now you guys are just reporting falsehoods. You're trying to ruin my name. The things that you're writing, the things that you're telling everyone else, they're not true, but I'm going to refute those claims, but at the same time, I'm going to continue to do the good work that I'm doing here. And just to wrap up this second point, though, the sad reality is that whenever we take up an endeavor, especially in God's name, it's not only people who are outside our proverbial walls of Jerusalem that are going to be against us or seeking to do us harm. Because we learn in chapter 6, verses 17, it says that, Also in those days the nobles of Judah sent many letters to Tobiah, and the letters of Tobiah came to them, for many in Judah were pledged to him, because there's some distant relationship there. But I think that just goes to show that whenever you take up an endeavor, there's going to be people outside of the camp, outside of the walls, who are trying to do you harm, and there's going to be people, sometimes there are going to be people within your walls who are seeking to do you harm as well. And it reminds me of what I talked about in December with David. I think it's a very similar situation. The situation that we found David in 2 Samuel, when he's on the run and his own men turn on him and they threaten to stone him. I think it's a very similar situation where we have the same, people that you trust and people that are within your camp. They're turning on you. So I think that's just a reminder that the people that oppose us, they're going to be outside the walls, and there's going to be some inside of our own walls. And I think that's something that we need to keep in mind. And just a third point here, very briefly, is that Nehemiah, he couples his prayer with action. And we see that in chapter 2, verses 4 through 5. In verse 4, he goes to Artaxerxes and he's asking him to do this. And the king said to me, What do you request? So I prayed to God of heaven, and I said to the king, If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, I ask that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's tombs, that I may rebuild it. Nehemiah, that was a very risky thing for him to do. He wasn't asking for a small favor. We enumerated the other things that he wanted. Going back to the first point, the vision that he had, the provisions that he knew that he needed. He was asking quite a bit from Artaxerxes, and so to kind of stick his neck out there, Nehemiah could have just prayed that maybe the stars will align someday, and I'll be able to go out and I'll go to Jerusalem one day, and I'll somehow gather the supplies and we'll rebuild the walls, and it probably won't be as good as it could have been, but instead Nehemiah prays to God, and then he takes action himself. And he sees an opportunity before Artaxerxes, and it works for him actually. And then the second instance where we see Nehemiah coupling his prayer with action is in chapter 4, verses 8 and 9, as Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs and the Ammonites are coming against them. In chapter 4, verses 8 and 9, and all of them conspired together to come and attack Jerusalem and create confusion. But nevertheless, we made our prayer to our God, and because of them, we set a watch against them day and night. So here again, Nehemiah is coupling his prayer with action. He sees that the enemies are coming against them in their moment of weakness as they're trying to rebuild the walls. We read later on that, every worker had, a sword in one hand and they're building the wall with the other hand. And Jim, that might be the answer to your question there, why the wall was only half the height. I guess when you got 4 armies coming against you while you're trying to fight them off and rebuild the wall, that might be the answer right there. But I feel like too often in life when we encounter difficulties, a lot of times I feel like, you'll hear people say, oh, okay, well, I'm dealing with this right now, and, I'm just going to pray to God, and that's it, and I'm not going to do anything because there's not much I can do about it. I'm not in a position to do anything. And while in some instances that might be true, it's certainly not always the case. I think in many instances we need to, like Nehemiah, we need to couple our prayers with action. We can't rely on God to do all the heavy lifting 100% of the time. Sometimes we have to put our mind to work and do some of the lifting ourselves. We have to do our part. So just to wrap up, those are just a few things that I picked out from the book of Nehemiah as I was reading through it again. The first one, if you have a mind to accomplish anything, if you want to live a life of significance, you have to have vision. You need a goal. You have to have an idea of how you're going to accomplish that. Proverbs 29:18, where there is no vision, the people perish. And Nehemiah goes before Artaxerxes with his vision in mind, and he enumerates all the things that he's going to need. Here's how long I'm going to be gone. This is the letters I need. I need you to send some of your troops with me. I'm going to need this much timber. He has a vision in mind, and that's what allows him to be successful. Number 2, when you take up an endeavor in the name of God, you're going to have the Sanballats, the Tobiahs, the Geshems, and even some of the nobles from Judah from inside your own walls. You're going to encounter those on the outside of your proverbial walls, and they're going to be those on the inside of your proverbial walls who are seeking to do likewise to bring you down and to do you harm even. But like Nehemiah, we need to take the necessary actions to protect ourselves, but at the same time, we need to continue in whatever endeavor it is that we're doing. I think Nehemiah was a great example of teaching, a large group of people that you can walk and chew gum at the same time. They're building the wall and they're fighting off all these different people. And similarly, Nehemiah doesn't let, the false claims and the false accusations that they bring against them, he doesn't let that hinder the process or the progress that he's making. He acknowledges it and refutes it, but he still continues in the work that he's doing. And then finally, the fact that we need to couple our prayers with action. We need to do some of the heavy lifting, and we can't ask God to do all the heavy lifting 100% of the time. We have to have a mind to work, and we have to take action if you want to accomplish anything. And the book of Nehemiah is just such a great example of what godly leadership in action looks like. I really encourage you to read through Nehemiah. There's so many other things that I wish I could have gone through today. I didn't want to take too long, but there's so many other lessons. If you want to learn how to be a godly leader, I think you need to read through Nehemiah. It's one of those books that every time you read through it, whether you're just studying or you have some event going on in your life, I feel like every time I read through the book of Nehemiah, I glean something new from it, and I think that everyone here can do the same. So I think Chris has got the closing song, and Travis has the closing prayer.
number 835, when he comes in glory, 835. Oh, how sweet 'twill be to meet the Lord when he comes in glory by and by. What a song of praise will be outpoured when he comes in glory by and by. How sweet when he comes in the sky. What joy when he comes in glory by and by. We will have our robes all white as snow when he comes in glory by and by. Oh, be ready with the Lord to go when he comes in glory by and by. How sweet when he comes in the sky. What joy when he comes in glory by and by. I am longing for that happy day when he comes in glory by and by. For with him I hope to soar away when he comes in glory by and by. How sweet when he comes in the sky. What joy when he comes in glory by and by.
Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for this time that we can gather tonight and just reflect on your word and learn more about you and how we can better change our lives to follow that example of Christ. Please help us to take this example of Nehemiah that here presented to us tonight, and that we not only continue to work on our prayer life with you, that we also look to take action in our life when it is presented to us, and that we can readily work your will and be lights among this dark world for others. Please be with us as we go about the rest of this week and help us to look for those opportunities to present your word to others, and that we do not back down. Thank you for Jesus dying on the cross, and the sins that have been washed away for us. We pray all these things in his name. Amen.
Yeah.
a little bit.
I still like it. I thought they didn't get like. You could have been where they were going. It could have been a lot. I was really interested in with how they U.S. agents, John Walker guys. Yeah.
But I hear everything here.
So much. And by the end, I was like, oh, you go back.
But he's like
Finally.
And then you have to by the end.
I think that is. I'm gonna have to trust us.
Yeah, the choices. And then they, and then they reinstate him not as tax America, but as U.S. operate for them.
We'll see. I like the clothes, I like everything, I like the whole ensemble.
I was wondering what the intention they were saying. Yeah, I thought they changed it. So much. Showing up and it's not like a full watch scruffy, not weird.
That was why you ladies, they're so lazy.
That he's answering to, and I was like, I was showing up basically one part, I would show up, but it's still like, if you're in uniform, you just show up with a half year, and then expect not to get moved out while other people, like, I mean, you're not just you're representing, but then you're supposed to be Captain America, and then you can't, that drove me nuts. And I was like, it looks good.
after they make them mess up some part of the uniform stuff. It can't be perfect. Always look at the uniform somewhere is going to be wrong. Usually they make a flat coming out or something. They don't know wearing rank and collar. You recorded our Marvel discussion.